It's all very well asking the kind of questions I pose on this channel, but where are the answers? If I'm willing to stick my neck out and propose that this world is possibly a prison, a manipulated reality, then how do we deal with it and gain the upper hand? Can we gain the upper hand? And if Archaics is correct about us facing the end of the simulation, or the world in other words, with other major religions claiming pretty much the same thing, is there anything we can do? Is the outcome inevitable? Is this end-time scenario even true? Now, I often outline with agonizing regularity a conundrum I'm facing with my search for the truth. There have been times when I thought I'd found it, only for it to dissipate and vanish into thin air. An illusion, ethereal in nature, having no substance. So I move on, continuing the search, and arrive at a crossroads, wondering which road I will take next. Where will it lead, and what the consequences will be? All our decisions have consequences, right? And when you get to my age, you become a lot more wary, far more cautious in making those decisions, especially important ones. Only an idiot puts his hand in the fire twice. And if that's true, and I'm pretty sure it is, then I think we all must be idiots to one degree or another. Be honest. How many of us have done exactly that? Put our hand in the fire more than once. Guilty as charged. With a society as screwed up as ours, with rampant manipulation and corruption all around us, what is the answer? What direction do we take next? Well, I think it's all down to how conscious we are as individuals.
Ah, boo!
Yeah, I know. Here we go again. But hear me out, because this is important. Being awake makes all the difference. Having the blindfold removed so we can navigate our way to freedom, instead of stumbling around in the dark, going about in circles, befuddled and bemused. Just like Minnesota drivers. And don't even get me started on roundabouts. Being awake is the most obvious answer, the logical start to solving the enigma. Now I believe, and not only do I believe this, but many scientists today also believe, that consciousness is fundamental to reality, not materialism. And I think it's when we move from the worldview of materialism or physicalism, where the ethic of that paradigm guarantees we are going to be motivated by control, power and force. If we move away from that ethos, we are going to leave behind the kind of world we have today, where everyone is out for themselves, where governments are composed of unscrupulous politicians who are nothing more than self-serving parasites, and an information structure, the mainstream media that seeks to enforce that vile system with its lies, often in the form of omission. It's frequently not what they tell us, but what they don't tell us is the problem. When we view consciousness as fundamental, then the ethic changes from control, power and force, to caring, love, and empathy. The focus changes to cooperation, compassion, and concern for others. Look around. Is that the main philosophy we see about us today? Hardly. I try to keep up with events in the UK as much as I can, and all I see in Parliament is chaos, fraud, corruption, and deceit, which exists in all the parties. The same goes for the US, with a nut house in DC in political disarray, and a judicial system openly corrupt and controlled by crooked politics. This is what the materialistic world brings to the table. Listen to Richard Dawkins, famous evolutionary biologist, and you will be encouraged to buy into the paradigm that it's about the survival of the fittest. Predator versus prey. That's everything materialistic evolution has to offer. And we see the results of that paradigm being played out before our very eyes. We have a world where the big fish eat the little fish. But when we remember who we are, which is pure consciousness, the ethic changes to, how can I help? What can I do? Not, what can I get? Or, why should I help you? What's in it for me? This is the materialist, the physicalist, the determinist worldview, which will result in control, power, and force. This will be, and most certainly is, the coin of the realm. That's how you get things in a material world. If you don't have control, if you don't have power, and if you don't have force, then you are at the bottom of the heap, and everyone will trample on you. Just ask your politicians. So, what can we do? Well, if we make that change in our understanding of the nature of reality, that consciousness trumps physicality, then over time we will create a totally different attitude. We begin to understand our true nature, our real power. All of this would become clear if we did that. Oh, I have another question. Yeah. Is this a likely scenario? Changing the world for the better, I mean. I don't know. I wish it were. But if the book of Revelation is to be believed, then no. The trajectory is evident. Add to this the history of natural catastrophes and the prophetic promise of more to come found in Revelation and other predictive sources such as Nostradamus. We have a depressing picture. The Phoenix phenomenon hypothesis advanced by archaics is just another one of them. We will be looking at that in another video. Such a plethora of good news. But I'm not going to give up on hope. Even if all of this becomes a reality, and it looks like it has already started, the awake and aware are being shown the exit door. Just make sure you're one of the awakened. The number of people waking up today is astonishing. The breaking of the seals is working its magic, or so it seems. And in the meantime, to avoid the mental trauma that must follow these disturbing events, well, make sure you transcend this so-called normality by changing your outlook, the way you think, by raising your vibration through different thought patterns, because it's our thoughts that cause most of our pain and anguish. Overthinking is a killer. Avoiding this can be accomplished by a fully seen reality. Break out of your perceptive bubble and seek to attain the ability to discern fact from fiction. And do this by being mindful of external influences, both benign and malevolent, spiritual and physical. This will help in the process of reducing trauma, or even eliminating it. See beyond the mainstream media propaganda, one of the many malicious external influences. But it's not all bad news.
Tired journalism industry is basically in a free fall. Today, the Los Angeles Times laid off 115 employees. They wiped out their entire DC bureau in an election year. They laid off pretty much all of their sports teams. They killed their entire tech and business section. They laid off breaking news writers, social media editors. The list goes on. But what's really dark is this is just the latest in months and months and months of layoffs in the media industry. In fact, tens of thousands of journalists have been laid off in the past year. Major media companies like BuzzFeed News have completely shuttered their news operations. Time magazine also just laid off a ton of people, and Sports Illustrated basically shut down last week. Pretty much the entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not just digital media sites. Local news has been obliterated. The newspaper industry is cratering. Radio is essentially dead aside from NPR, which has been gutted. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers at Condé Nast, the parent company of pretty much every major magazine from GQ to Vogue to The New Yorker to Vanity Fair, are on strike because they're also facing impending layoffs. Even mainstream national media outlets owned by billionaires like The Washington Post, where I work, and The Atlantic, where I used to work, have done layoffs. If you're a young journalist today, there's almost no on-ramp to traditional journalism. Even if you do get a job, journalists' salaries have been stagnant and even declined. And by the way, we don't make that much to begin with. I don't think people understand how bad the world would be without journalists.
How bad the world would be without journalists? Talk about delusional. Well, if you didn't lie so much, more people would listen to you. Anyhow, we have a better option. It's called independent journalism. The real journalists who people listen to, and most of whom are doing very well, thank you very much. We the people want real journalists, and not you zombies of the state. So, go whine somewhere else. I mentioned in the last video that we are not the top predator in this sick world, that there is a parasitic energy which sees us as nourishment. But we can fight that also by not engaging emotionally in the simulacrum, or however you view reality. So, with that in mind, what's up with these seals and their prophetic nature? Let's continue to look, shall we? I'm the Grumpy Grandpa. Now, we've arrived at the fifth seal.
And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them. And it was said unto them, that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren, that should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled.
Don't forget to view these seals in context. They are wake-up calls, and time is short. So you'd better rouse yourself and become conscious. Quit the dream state. Now the fourth horseman has come and gone. What follows is a profound change in the afterlife. When you die, that is from the fourth seal onwards, there is no returning to the sim cycle for another chance to get things right. Reincarnation comes to an end, in other words. Whatever your internal state, whether righteous or unrighteous, awake or asleep, you will be quarantined away from the living. A winnowing in the harvest takes place. Now, if you are unaware, winnowing is a process that involves separation, separating the desirable elements from the undesirable ones, typically by using a current of air. The term is often used in agriculture or food processing. In the traditional agricultural sense, winnowing is the method of separating grain from chaff. That's the husks, straw, or other unwanted materials. And they do this by tossing the mixture into the air. A draft is created by a fan or the wind, and it helps carry away the lighter chaff, leaving behind the heavier grains. Now, this separation process is employed to identify valuable components from the unwanted ones. In our context, separating the awake from those who are asleep, those who overcome from those who fail to overcome. Now, a thinning out of the population is taking place, and this is happening behind the scenes. So, in a sense, nothing will be very noticeable, except whatever's happening during this time, according to archaics, no souls are being born back into the sim. That's kind of creepy. If it is true, of course. Now, a lot of what we see in the book of Revelation is cryptic stuff, and this opens a whole new can of worms. If Jason is correct on this, and I'm not saying he is, the obvious next question is, what's being born after 2032? If you can't tell, I'm having trouble with this idea. I can't imagine that births will suddenly end at this time. For me, that's not an option. But there is a fear right now of a population collapse taking place. People do not have the number of children needed to maintain a culture anymore. Scientists are predicting that China has already passed the point of no return, and societal collapse is inevitable. So much for their one-child policy, I guess. The same thing is happening in Europe. The one demographic that doesn't seem to be affected by this is the Islamic world. They continue to have more than 2.5 children per family, the number needed to maintain a culture. Now, regarding this phenomenon, Muammar Gaddafi, remember him? One-time Libyan ruler? He once said that all Muslims need do is wait for their culture to become the dominant one. Now, it looks like this prediction is coming true. And place that within the context of the second seal also, where peace is said to be taken from the earth. Remember what we said about the Christian-Islamic conflict that will take place? That makes that very interesting. But in terms of simulation theory, there might be another answer. There are what is known as NPCs, or non-player characters. An NPC is a character in a video game that is not controlled by the player. They are AI, or artificial intelligence. They are run by the simulation to make up for the lack of real players. They are fillers, in other words. Are they going to be people born with no souls, maybe? Having trouble wrapping your head around that concept? Hollow people, devoid of emotion? We have enough soulless psychopaths in the world. The last thing we need are more corrupt politicians.
Infrastructure Week, America's having infrastructure decade. Over $1,300,000,000,300,000,000. Over $1,300,000,000,300,000,000. Over $1,300,000,000,300,000,000. I see shovels in the ground, cranes in the sky, people hard at work rebuilding America together.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him. The meeting. If you don't have a game plan, he may have a game plan. He just hasn't shared it with me. But I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed. We talked about at the conference overall. We talked about stability. We talked about making sure that the third world, the southern hemisphere had access to changes, had access. It wasn't confrontational at all. He came up to me and said,
Thank you, everybody. This ends the press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I started thinking about it, just as somebody who's raised a middle-class kid. 1 year, even though you didn't have the job you have now, even though you didn't get a raise that year, the difference between having a job, having a 5% raise or whatever, 3, 5, 7, whatever it happens to be, in the face of inflation, price of the pump, although that's down every day so far, But, you know, it's like, whoa, I feel worse off. But then again, I didn't get a check for $8,000 from the government. They just, among other things. Does that make any sense to anybody, or is it just me?
Joe, no, Joe, you're not making any sense to me either. Now, here Biden is trying to act intelligent. I don't know if you noticed, but the facade is paper thin. There are times when I think that blithering Biden might be an NPC, a non-character player, an artificial intelligence. But then I'm reminded that even artificial intelligence has intelligence. That rules jockstrap Joe out, doesn't it? Perhaps having no soul has something to do with it. And, oh, by the way, if you vote in clowns, you're gonna get a circus. Just saying. Is there an escape from this lunacy that doesn't involve the unthinkable? There may be temporary options which would involve transcending the mundane through practices like meditation. That exercise has been proven to help many people gain some precious lucid moments, resulting in a temporary escape from the asylum. I often practice meditation with inspiring music in the background. And when gruesome images enter the moment, I observe, smile, and dismiss them as intrusions inserted by the simulation in an effort to upset my day. I send the archonic parasites the message that they have no influence over me. Don't give in to fear, depression, or a defeatist attitude. That's the nectar of the archonic energy. Deny them that loosh. I asked at the beginning of the video if the outcome of the breaking of the seals is inevitable. I don't know. But my intuition tells me that if this picture painted by the book of Revelation and other prophetic sources reduces you to food for the parasites in terms of your outlook, then you should instead see the future as not written in stone, but rather as a potentiality. When you arrive at that crossroads or that fork in the road, instead of going with what your programmed mind says is the best way, go instead with your intuition, your inner knowing. Then, if David Icke is correct, your life will be transformed from an existence to an amazing synchronistic series of coincidences that make life much more interesting, enjoyable, and full of vitality than just the mind following the programs around, and you get the point. Because what exactly is prophecy and how reliable is it? Now I'm sounding like Sleepy Joe. Until the next time.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Grumpy Old Buggers channel, so I can get some peace and quiet.